story go, na story come. So truth is, life ni kama greetings, na una have ku appreciate what you get. Leo mara haba juu kesho utashikamo. Na ukishikamo, be ready for familiar questions like umetoka wapi, nikawa alishasahau umetoka the same uko. Dear future wife, I hope uko poa. Mimi niko training ya kuwa daddy mpoa na nimeanza na kulea nywele. Juu naogopa kuwa wale wazazi walishindwa kulea mtoto kama mimi, siku hizo wananiona kwa TV, wanauliza ni aje nimegrow. So is it even right nikisema mama alikuwa player? Juu she had to play a role ya dad na mom. But mom usijali. Wakikuuliza wewe shining, wakumbuka you gave birth to... DJ nisaidie hiyo nyingine jamani. Story go. Nipeeni saiki jamani. Tunaweka hizi vitu TikTok. Story go. Na story come. Na hiyo spirit iko hapa itaki tuongee ishindwe kabisa. Si ndio? So mimi naitwa Brian Silways. Nafanya spoken word for social change. Apart from kuperform kwa event kama hizi, kwa tuna inject pale kwa matatu, inaitwa matatu Get in the Bus Civic Education with a good friend of mine ako pale anaitwa Willy Oeba. So manze, so tukipatana huko kwa matatu pia tunaendeleza injili, si ndio? So even if you don't take a look at me, I will still do it. Yes, you. Then the rest of you. Then rest in peace to all the fallen trees. You see, they don't need this moment of silence. All they need is a moment of replacement. Now it rings in my mind. Why did we have to kill this relationship before even our engagement? You see, the problem is we don't really know between education and communication which one is the real key. Another key issue is we can't go on with this president. Now before you respond to this, first of all respond to those who are killed, because that's all I care about. I don't care about your entitlement. What is this culture that people with zero interest are going to represent us on that parliament? Nasema climate change has affected. Apart from the solar system, siata our sound system itatuhit na the like jua kali. Confusing weather mpaka sasa ukitoka hapo you don't know whether you need fulana ama fulani. Nasema dear Mr. President, just like your friends abroad umefanya Kenya na madeni zimekuwa ma BFF. Wewe unaenda kudiscuss issues za vibanda kwa KEF. Dear Mr. President, uko state house apart from bathing wezi pata waoga. Nasema wewe umesoma, lakini una invite politician hajasoma kwa address watoto wako kuhusu masomo. Education is the only key ukiwa mtoto. Tuli grow up tukarealize politician hajasoma ndo wako na the most expensive keys to their motto. Nasema Kenya, tunaambia serikali lazima isikike. Inakatika. Na sasa inakatika jamani. Hata nimemaliza. That was my time. Thank you so much. Barikiwe na naitwa Brian Silways, ndio. Na hapa kwa finance naweza kwa rafiki yetu.
Thank you so much, my brother. That was a good one. Thank you so much. We really appreciate. Apologies for the technical inconvenience. Ladies and gentlemen, we'll have something little from Edmund, briefly, as we call upon our panelists so that we we kick off the conversation. Edmund, uko tayari? Aya, proceed, bro. In the meantime, we are going to have a discussion on a very critical issue. Very, very critical issue that we need to really delve into and find solutions and positive proposals as far as public finance management is concerned. Like we said in the morning, if you have a burning issue and you have a concern, please, we have sticky notes. Just do the writing, utanipea niweke pale. Na kama uogopi kutembea hapa, utaweka pale mwenyewe. Kama unaogopa kupita hapa, utanipea niweke pale. Hii iko sawa? Iko sawa? Thank you. Edmund. Thank you. Let's appreciate Edmond tafadhali. Tumpigeni jamaa makofi. Unajua nimekuwa nikiuliza huyu jamaa hapa. Anasema unajua hii sasa ametupeleka mood ya Mudhaiga, Runda. Lakini sasa nataka turudi pande nyingine. Si ndio? Tuingie Mathare kidogo, tupite pale Mukuru kwa Njenga. Si ndio? Tukielekea Mwiki kule chini. DJ, tutoe huko Mudhaiga bwana. Watu wamesema huko ni mbaya sana. Haya.
When you drop it down low on the floor, yeah, that's what you prefer. Put your money where your mouth one day, yeah, that's what me prefer.
Unaweza simama tafadhali. Tusimame, tumetoka lunch bwana. Tusimame. Kidogo. Simama. Kidogo. My brother. Kidogo, sindio? Simama. Naona pale Kiai anasema hizi ndo mambo yangu sasa. Haya, twende hapa. Kumbe nyinyi wote ni watu ya ODM. Kumbe nyinyi ni supporters ya baba. Sugua mak.
When you drop it down low on the floor, yeah, that's what you prefer. Put your money where your mouth one day, yeah, that's what me prefer.
Hapo.
Set it, pick up, set it.
Kuna ile pa. Step kama ikuja. Kuja utuoneshe bwana. Haya, twende.
Nigeni chape ni setie ni shande. Ngoja mapikin baka lale.
Songa hivi uoneshe.
Down.
Hapo.
Bad girl career inafanya na esa. Only fun window recording hizo videsa. Dema Uhuru lakini ni peng makutesa.
Pale nyuma. DJ pull up DJ kidogo. Nataka tukianguka nao tuende nao sisi wote bwana. Si ndio? Naona pale kwa kona yule jamaa amesema kufa paka kufa panya. Hakuna kuepa. Haya DJ, drop it down.
Tushasikia.
Fanya hivi. Yaani umeamua mbaya.
Tushasikia kikingia ni kublast. Huko ngabado na chukua madam so anguka nao itabaki meflow na vibe. Anguka nao koko single for now. Dagis mteja patikani. Hadi late night saa 6 ndo tani wai. Nikupin location and kufana na.
Haya, DJ ngoja. Huyu amesema kupita hapa. Hawezi ana kitu wengine. Nani yako na ingine? Nani yako na kitu ingine? Anaweza ongezea mahali ameachilia. Nani? Haya kuja. Unataka kuja? Haya, umeshakula nomination kuja. Unajua kupata nomination hii Kenya sio rahisi. Hata ukipata kama hizi zoea hii inaweza kuwa yako ya mwisho. Haya, DJ. Weka chini.
Smile cheki kamgapi statu na kulike mekuma kweni tatu digidha gidhinya siaga kwadu una bend pose alafu na raru piga
na wadamia kama kwaya bwana
inua mkono alafu cheza na piga statu na kulike mekuma kama tatu simama kete piga walege tingiza kichwa ni kazi meshika kwelve kispaki anguka nayo twende hapa ni kudance kubanju kama daily pige makofi utachoka mikono kama na utamis nyingi
weka juu
pige makofi utachoka mikono kama na utamis nyingi
weka juu
ngono pelando umlando
hadi
ngono pelando umlando
ngoja. Kwani hapa hakuna Gen Z bwana anaweza tukimbiza. Naona kama naona kuna watu tu miaka yangu hapa. Watu walikuja enzi za Moi. Nani anaanza tupeleka mbio hapa sasa? Ama DJ, nipe kitu kutoka pale pande ya Western. Naona hapa tumejaa watu ya Msangalile. Watu wamejaa mabega. DJ, nipe kitu kutoka pale pande ya Western tuone hapa, maybe Nelly anaweza tubadilishia mawazo. Ama namna gani? Si ndio? Unataka gani ile? My dear.
Leta wa mzungu mano mkatumi. Ihali nende msuafula. Mana webwe.
Leta kuja hapa mbele.
Combination
jamini. Kama unajamini.
Bana batate sunjende. Abuse. Kwaga nokaba yenyumira. Abuse. Ila ino noche ndaste meresia. Abuse. Andolile mwene walu plano. Abuse. Basale banje
Usijishikilie. Kama imekuwa mbaya kuja mbele. Ndio kuja mbele.
Wa mwene na vundova. Abuse. Le unu mwene ya yamanyu. Abuse. Babia banje sunjende. Abuse. Ando kino wele umanyanga. Abuse. Bane kosiro mbele. Abuse.
Kama hajamini kuja hapa. Tupangishe laini hapa.
Somalia.
Hapo nyuma jamani. Hapo nyuma.
Kula ngoma senyenge mzee.
Kula ngoma.
Ana wa mai umbora sina.
Oya ya umbora sina.
Ana wa mai umbora sina.
Oya ya umbora sina.
Ndio mubyange umbora sina.
Oya ya umbora sina.
Ipande ngine jamani. Kwani nini mkwaji? Tumkuje.
Natamba wale umbora sina.
Oya ya umbora sina.
Natamba wale.
Naona pale nyuma kumeharibika.
Oya ya umbora.
Pale nyuma imechemuka.
My dear, I love you. 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 My dear, I look you. You look me. I look you. You look me.
Angalia mtu. Angalia mtu. Angalia mtu hapo. Ade I look you. You do what?
I think of you. I don't sleep. I think of you. I don't sleep. I think of you. I think on you. I love you.
DJ ngoja. Tumetoka Western. Watu ya Kisumu Dala mko hapa. Watu ya Nyanza mupo. Watu mko tayari? DJ nitafutie kitu hapo. Kitu hapo inaweza fanya samaki itoke pale leki kuje hapa. Si ndio? Na mko tayari kuja hapa? Naona venye Western imewakilishwa. Vizuri Mko tayari? Western iko tayari, imejipanga. Hiyo iko sawa. DJ, nipe kitu pale pande ya Nyanza. Pale pande ya Kisumu Dala, Homa Bay. Wale wameketi jamani. Haya, twende. Haya, hapa. Unajua pole. Hii pesa. Haya, guza tumbo. Kidogo. Mambo ya pesa hii. Haya. Shikilia hapo, wekelea hapo. Kidogo tu. Mambo ya pesa hii jamani. Pale nyuma, pole. Mambo ya pesa hii. Haya.
Meja Aguna, Javan Honano,
Fura kidogo. Occupy the space. Yaani occupy the space. Wewe ni mtu ya Nyanza kweli? Occupy the space. Toa gadget tuangalie. Confirm miss call. Toa gadget. Angalia kwa mbali. Angalia vizuri. Haya. Shika hivi. Angalia hapa. Angalia hapo. Angalia vizuri tena. Kumbe ni mtu ya fuliza. Kumbe ni mtu ya reverse call. Tana hiyo simu. Bura kidogo. Hapa, twende hapa. Twende hapa. Kumbe nyinyi wote ni watu ya EU. DJ pull up. Naona hapa kuna watu ya Nyanza na watu ya Musangalire. Nataka tuangalie kama tuko na watu ya muko tayari jamani? Wangapi wako na shares? DJ, nitafutie kitu ya mlima hapo. Nimeona pande ya National Assembly hapa kidogo. Hii ni Senate. Hii ndio National Assembly. Ando wako active. Majority. DJ nipeleke mlima.
Ikolea wekaga ndiria warakara muhiki waku uria undigeire nitwendanire. Ikolea wekaga ndiria warakara muhiki waku.
Nani anatuongoza hapa? Nani anatuonyesha direction? Wale wa mlima wako wapi? Wale wa kuja mlima. Nani anatuonyesha? Nani anatuonyesha? Kuja tuonyeshe jamani. Ndio hiyo. Tuangalie hapa.
Ikolea wekaga ndiria warakara muhiki waku uria undigeire nitwendanire. Ikolea wekaga ndiria warakara muhiki waku uria undigeire nitwendanire.
Guza yo mlima bwana. Guza yo mlima.
Ukonjerete kuroragire. Guza ya rume. Etonga uro mationaga ndirorie. Ukonjerete kuroragire.
Asante. DJ. Ati nini? Ati nini? Eko. Tosha DJ, tosha. Ni kama DJ pia ni wa mlima. DJ ni wa mlima. Acha hiyo maneno yako my friend. Acha hiyo maneno yako. We can sit, we can have our seats. We can have our seats. I hope watu ya Kisii na watu ya Chamge tuko na nyinyi kwa budget. Tulisema every issue is a budget issue. Tuko na nyinyi kwa budget. Kabla jua yanguke, lazima tusikie ile pande nyingine wanasema aje. Naona kuna mtu ya chama ya baba na mama pale. Lazima tuangalie mambo yenu. Iko sawa? Thank you so much, ladies and gentlemen. At this point, we are going to move to our next panel discussion. And you'll allow me invite our moderator for this session, Mr. Kelvin Jai. Kelvin Jai, where? Mali uko? Kelvin Jai. Ni wewe, kumbe ni wewe ulikuwa na dance up. Mpigeni makofi bwana. Kumbe huyu jamaa aya. Imeenda. Mpigeni makofi huyo Kelvin Jai. Kelvin Jai is the communications officer with Africa Youth Trust. Thank you, my brother. And on this, we have Emeka Mayaka. Emeka Mayaka, managing editor, People Daily. Karibu, my senior. Karibu. Let's appreciate him. And then tuko na Edward Kipkalia. Mr. Edward Kipkalia. Tumpigeni makofi, jamaa amepiga suti moja hatari. Karibu ndugu yangu. Huyo ni Strategic Initiatives and Partnerships Officer, Emerging Leaders Foundation. Si anakaa image kweli? Si ameimage? Naona suti imepigwa pasi. Imekubali. My brother, you are an emerging leader. You have actually emerged. We are having Mr. Harrison Manga. Karibu, my brother. Mr. Harrison Manga with the media focus. Let's appreciate him. And then finally, we'll have Mr. Keith Muhati. Keith Muhati from, this is the project officer, Africa Youth Trust. Let's appreciate Keith Muhati. Karibu, my brother. Asante. Oh. I'm informed that we are going to have on board Gashui Agnes. Agnes Gashui. Is she with us already? I think she's going to join us as we proceed. Gashui Agnes, she'll join us as we proceed. So ladies and gentlemen, at this point we are going to have a discussion on countering disinformation and misinformation. And our topic today is leveraging open data and transparency to counter disinformation, misinformation in public finance management. And at this point, I'd like to give it back to my brother, Mr. Kelvin Jahi, to give us guidance and directions on how we are going to deal with this segment. And I want to advise that members of the Senate, tumeambiwa kwamba nyinyi ni lower house, manake nyinyi ni wachache sana. Mukuje bunge, muungane na National Assembly, tafadhali. Those who are sitting at the Senate side, as we proceed, you can join the National Assembly so that we can have one discussion. My brother, take over.
Good afternoon, ladies and gentlemen. My name is Kelvin Njai, as you've heard. Not Njahi. Unasikia wewe? Njai. Yeah. we should start charging people for mispronouncing our name. So you are told every issue is a budget issue, right? So before I introduce my panel, I just wanted to do a quick thing. Yeah? When I told my friend that I was supposed to be moderating disinformation and misinformation about public finance management, he told me something, that the government cooks figures, it's corrupt, they're unverifiable, or all the above. Do you agree? Please note that down. They also agree. And in any case, I told him that I am not Nancy Gadogo, who has been very, very vocal in calling out the government, its flamboyancy, and each and every other thing that this government is doing. Have we not seen a house being renovated with like $1 billion when there is no hospital fund or education money? Have we not seen when we are told that we tunaargue kuhusu finance bill na iko kitu haituhusu? Ama mkumbuki? So with that, we'll be seeking to debunk all these myths. Look at disinformation, misinformation, how the media come in, how can CSO join in, and how we can have all these now wrapped up together. And without further ado, allow me to give the floor to, starting with you over there, as you introduce yourself and tell us what you do.
Hi, everybody. My name is Harrison Manga. Sorry, forgive me. My name is Harrison Manga. I work at Media Focus on Africa. And what we do is we're an organization that works with and through media in pursuit of social change. And that social change is in a variety of areas. But even the area of public finances is an area that we have an interest in. And therefore, we have strategies that we utilize to try and ensure that the public finance space can also bring about the change that we desire. So that's who I am. Thank you.
All right. Good afternoon, everyone. Good afternoon, everyone. My name is Edward Kipkalia. I serve with an organization called Emerging Leaders Foundation Africa. We are very keen on young people between the ages of 18 to 35, and also the young people in the schools of institutions and higher learning. And we do equip them with knowledge, skills, values, and networks for them to be able to thrive in their society. And we do this through our programmatic pillars of governance and civic engagement, leadership development and mentorship, governance, and also economic empowerment. And so we are very keen on ensuring that young people have the right access to information, they have access to mentors, and also they have access to resources that will enable them overcome unemployment, underemployment, and also when they want to do business, that they have a space where they can do that. Thank you.
Good afternoon. Good afternoon. My name is Keith Muhati. I work at Africa Youth Trust, where I serve as the project officer under the pillar of youth and good governance. So at Africa Youth Trust, we are concerned with issues to do with youth development with a view of replication to other African countries. So how we impact communities is through our various pillars, like the one I've mentioned, youth and good governance. We also have women and economic empowerment. We also have livelihood resilience, and finally, climate smart agriculture. So that's who I am and the institution that I work for. Thank you.
Good evening, everybody. Or is it? It's afternoon. My name is Meka Mayaka Gegara. I'm managing editor of the People Daily and PD Weekend. Those are perhaps we pride ourselves to be the first Kenya's only fully digital newspaper that drives conversations around people-centered politics, environment, the future. So when I was invited to come and engage in a people's dialogue, I feel at home because my paper is called People Daily.
Hamjambo nyote. My name is Gashi Kariuki. I'm an advocate of the High Court of Kenya. I am also a director of Ustawi KE, a community-based organization in Kiambu County, where we do youth-led accountability and governance. I am very much at home when talk about governance, everything and anything included, including constitutionalism, politics, political representation. When you talk about decision-making, public participation, anything and everything within that space. I am thrilled to be here and to deliberate on this topic of misinformation and disinformation. Thank you.
Thank you very much, everyone who has introduced themselves. We were also supposed to have Eric Mugendi, I know from African Censored Media. If he is here, maybe. Okay, it's okay, we'll just continue. I want us to do, where is the MC? I want you to do a simple exercise to the audience before we even begin this conversation, and because I want it to set the tone or the pace that we're gonna go with. Can I have 3 people from there? From, 3 and 2 there. In a quick thing, I'm not gonna ask you difficult questions. Kindly, just volunteers or someone can bring the microphone. Okay, let me have this. Get this. Hello, tell us your name.
My name is Robin Karani.
Oh, Robin. Should I move away from this? Okay. So, Robin, I want you to tell me whether you are opposed to Finance Bill 2024.
Yes, I was.
What clause was so wrong that you're opposed personally, not what the public knew or what you as Robin felt that it was a threat to you?
Yeah.
Yes.
Okay, so, well, I don't know where to start. It is not
just one, so that you
just
can,
one. So I think my biggest call was the fact that we do not need to have a finance bill every year, and that the leadership was using the opportunity to pass an appropriations law to put finance bill for us every year. That made business in general unpredictable, and so we lacked investments.
Okay, are you rejecting the Finance Bill 2025 then?
Yes, even before I see it.
So I'll give it to somebody else.
Thank you,
Just come near here.
Thank you very much. My name is James Mongai from Kiambu County. Yes, I was opposing the Finance Bill 2024 on reason based that I'm an advocate of good governance, the spirit of public participation where most Kenyans participated and said that our views must be captured, and they were never captured. So I was against where the spirit of public participation was not appreciated. Asante sana.
Okay. Another person, please. Okay, if there is none, then we can come back. We can bring it back. There is no one who was opposing Finance Bill 2025 just because it was what was in the talk that time.
I think one of my biggest issues was around the sanitary products conversation. And while there was disinformation around what was to be taxed, I didn't like how the government handled that, especially because it ignored key aspects of that conversation. I remember I was personally engaged in a very heated argument with one of the leaders, Pale LinkedIn, because she was arguing, no, we should continue to use locally made products. But the question is, those locally made products, most of them, they do not meet the quality standards. If you come out here and listen to women, they experience a lot of issues around these products. So for a parliamentarian or a leader to tell us that they use certain products and they use tampons and they use menstrual cups and that we should support local businesses. We are not opposed to local businesses, but please make sure that while you push us to that direction, that you're also ensuring they meet the quality standards that are supposed to be in that particular sector. And that for me was misinformation and disinformation from the government aspect as well.
Thank you very much. And I'm gonna push it back to starting here from you. And what was the role of the media in debunking the Finance Bill 2025, or rather than misinformation that surrounded it, and how it could have been dealt with better?
Thank you. I think for me the first fundamental point to be made, and this is a general point that I think is important to appreciate in this entire conversation, is misinformation or disinformation thrives in an environment where people do not necessarily know what the truth or the facts are. And I think that in our country, there is very limited understanding of the whole architecture of the public finance management. Not everyone understands. For instance, the gentleman that gave his view told us that there is no requirement that we have to have a finance bill every year. But I don't think that that's a widely held understanding, that there is no need for a finance bill every year as we're making the budget. Now, all of this speaks to the fact that there is very limited understanding of what is supposed to happen in terms of how we manage our finances. So there's a whole process, there's a whole law that governs how we are supposed to manage finances in Kenya. The understanding and the awareness around that is very limited. Therefore, it gives us an environment that is ripe for disinformation for misinformation. And this can be by anyone. It can be by government. It can even be by media. It can be by civil society. It can be by the general public. So I think for me, the starting point, if we really are to combat the challenge around misinformation and disinformation, then we need to appreciate that there's a level of public understanding of the public finance system, structure, process that is lacking and that is required. And of course, media can help in creating that awareness, but you'll also appreciate that even within media houses, even amongst the practitioners, the understanding of that public finance management architecture is not necessarily, very deep, and you may not find it with every practicing person in the media space. So I think the first step that we all need to take is to try and understand what the public finance management outlay looks like in Kenya. There is a law that I think we all would appreciate if we got to understand, and that law, it's called the Public Finance Management Act. So for me, that's where I'll start from. So can we have a general level of understanding of what public finance management looks like? And then when we have that, then it is possible to begin to combat the misinformation and the disinformation. Because if you do not know, then even when you're being misinformed, you won't know. And this lack of knowledge, like I've said, cuts across the board, from the very top in terms of the policymakers all the way, to the ordinary Kenyan. So for me, that's my entry and that's my starting point. Thank you.
All right. Thank you very much, Kelvin. And just to pick up where Harrison has left, I think it's very important for us to understand what misinformation, disinformation, and malinformation is, because if we keep talking about disinformation and misinformation without understanding really what they are, then we might be able to continue spreading them. And so if you look at disinformation is when you are with intent communicating false information with a perception to deceive the public or the people you're intending to. So, for example, sending a false message on social media, posting that something that is not true, for example, with the purpose of ensuring that you are making people know that that is not the truth that is happening. Misinformation is whereby you're not very sure about the information that is there, but because you've seen it somewhere or someone has said it and you've not verified it, you go ahead and share it out. Then we have malinformation, where malinformation is the space where you are able to have information that is misleading, and this misleading information, you capitalize on that and add your own misinformation into the message that you're trying to pass across. And so there are two things that are very critical in talking about disinformation and misinformation. One of them is your intent. What is your intention of communicating? Is your intent to spread propaganda? Is your intent to communicate the truth? Is your intent to soil people's name? The second one is, what is the truth? Because is there a universal truth about some of the things that we know about? And truths and facts are very important. And so once you distinguish between the two, it becomes very clear that you are able to understand what is really going on. And so at this point, Kelvin, there's something I'm going to do, which is unexpected. I look at our panel composition, I look at our audience composition, and there's a voice that we're missing. And that voice is very important. And so allow me to cede my position to invite a young lady to take up this position. I saw Anne somewhere, and Mercy. If you can, please take over my position, because we need your voice, since women are the most affected when it comes to disinformation. Thank you.
Okay, welcome to the session. Edward, I don't know whether you could have just stayed. I think there are more seats I can cede my seat also for you. I do not necessarily have to, to sit to moderate. However, thank you and welcome to the session. I don't know. But allow me to just jump you for now so that I can give you some room to compose yourself and we hit the ground running. And I ask you, Keith, you're working with youth people and they're also affected by misinformation. And I would want to know, how can we equip young people with skills to identify and counter misinformation about public finance?
Thank you, Kevin, for that question. And I feel whatever happened last year, we can accredit it to the youths. They are the reason why we didn't have the finance bill. So I can start by saying that I believe it has become very hard to lie to people, to Kenyans. Because I feel like there's a lot of information that you can find on the internet, and we've automatically become fact checkers. We're even doing it on a real-time basis. You'll find that someone will proclaim that a project was done by so-and-so, but quickly youth will go online and search and find that actual project is was initiated in the last regime or in the previous regime. So I feel like we're at that point, and from a Gen Z standpoint, I feel that is a win. The awakening is good for us to champion for issues such as accountability and transparency. So there are various things that has led us to this point, and I would like to just touch a bit on that. As I've mentioned, that we are well connected in terms of internet connectivity. We are the fourth country in Africa that is connected. In East Africa, I believe we are the leading, and that in itself provides us and equips the youth with the needed skills to actually counter the the information that they feel that is misrepresented or is put out there to actually push an agenda. So we have digital literacy levels have gone higher. And another thing, when it comes to legislation, the Constitution of 2010 provided for Article 35, access to information, which asserts that individuals have the right to access information that is being withheld by the government or any other person that will allow them to exercise their rights and freedoms. So that in itself also pushes us to actually find information and also fact check some of the things that we see out here. It's not like in the past where information was only privy to people who had privileged access or people who could buy a newspaper on a daily. So I feel that is what got us to that point. And how youth can be equipped with skills, I feel like there are a lot of digital that I've seen come up since last year. There was a data fellowship programs that many civil society organizations initiated last year. This was another program is there's another government program. I don't know the name for this program per se, but I know they were installing hotspots, Wi-Fi hotspots in certain areas. So I feel that also tried to help in terms of having information out there and for people to actually fact check whatever is going on in the country. So I'll end there.
Thank you very much, Keith, for such an informative, explanation on that question. And I would come to you, Mr. Emeka, right? And we are told many other times that now media keeps information, and that used to happen before the advent of online media. And I would like you to know what is the role of the traditional media, and especially the newspaper and the broadcast in countering disinformation, and how journalists can be empowered to face the challenges that they do face when reporting about public finance management.
Thank you very much. Now, that quality that my colleague provided is very critical in this conversation. One, misinformation can be accidental, but disinformation is deliberate. So, of these two animals, one of them is very lethal, the disinformation. Now, disinformation is when you deliberately give false information with the intention of confusing decision making. Now, let's go back to our budget making process. If you look at our budget making process, at the center of the conversation is resource distribution. But then, when you look at it, it is also a political instrument. A resource distribution instrument, but it's also a political instrument. Now, at what point does the disinformation come in? We need to see as a people who in the budget making chain is likely to be mischievous. The person likely to be mischievous in the budget making process is the politician, because he plays a very critical role in this process that is outlined here. And this one comes at the approval stage. The approval stage places the political actor in confrontation with Article 1. Now, what society do we have of politicians? We have a political elite that is very irritated with the instructions the Constitution gives rightly at Article 1, that there are people, servants, who should take instructions from the people. Now, the disinformation comes like this. At that stage where politicians don't want to take instructions from the people. And to evade that process, they disinform. They give false information. Why do they give false information? Why do they want to disinform? They want to disinform because our society, our political communities fear an empowered person. So, because information is power, an empowered people can be lethal, is it? So to prevent, to disarm people then they make a deliberate decision to give them false information. That becomes disinformation. So the mischievous person in the chain becomes the person who sits in parliament, in the two houses of parliament, when he is confronted with the reality that he has got to input what has come out of public participation, is it? What was the rejection about? It was reject or approve. And then politicians failed to take instructions. Our politicians don't want to take instructions from people who employed them. Article 1. That's why Article 1 of the Constitution is very important in this process. That public participation component in budget making allows people to exercise Article 1, which then places themselves in confrontation with politicians who do not want to input the people's voice in this process. What then becomes the role of the media in that process? We align our content choices to identify with the causes of the people. What are the people saying? We practice what we call people-centered politics. We align, at that time, we defect from the political end and join the people and drive their conversations. And that is reflected in the way we choose our content and the way we distribute it. We take formats that are pro-people. For example, I produce a digital newspaper. I will write those headlines and give them to you in the spaces where you are. That is in the digital space. And then, more importantly, is that we also debunk the disinformation. Our responsibility becomes producing credible, truthful content that can help people make informed decisions which politicians don't want them to make. So we align with the people and produce people-centered content that are aligned to the causes of the people. If, for example, the media, if we made a very deliberate decision in some of the organizations where we come from to identify with the Gen Z conversation because we assessed that's where our audiences were. Thank you.
Thank you very much. And before we come to you, allow me to welcome Eric Mugendi. I want to give you the mic because some very important questions have been raised on, the government misinforming people for the sake of, their personal gains. So I want you to tell us, as you introduce yourself rather, what is the role of investigative journalism and how it is shaping the discourse, in terms of public finance management?
All right. So first of all, sorry for coming late. I had another engagement also on fact-checking, verification, misinformation, disinformation. And it was a conversation with the national intelligence apparatus. So it was about the threat that these things pose on national security and other similar aspects. But I think because from my experience, what I have seen is that the problem often is not a lack of information. This information tends to be out there, but what we see is that this information may need to be processed and presented to the people in a way that they can understand. And a lot of times the government has benefited from the fact that people are not lazy per se, but they have a lot of other priorities aside from trying to focus on what is happening in the public finance space. For example, every year the government initiates the budget making process, and a key component of that is public participation. But what we've seen is that these public participation exercises are often done in times when not everyone can attend because we have other conflicting engagements, and also the documents they present at these public participation forums tend to be different from what is actually presented at the end. And because they benefit from making just one copy of this document or making very limited physical copies of these documents available to people to scrutinize, when it's time to ask questions, people will start focusing on issues that are not really central to what is being discussed at that particular forum. So as investigative journalists, I think one really big role for us is to take some of these things that are being put out in the public domain and actually scrutinizing them in a way that kind of ensures that people really understand what's going on. And I think the most recent example of not a crisis per se, but an issue that emerged within the public finance space is the Auditor General's report, which came out and said, this is how much counties are meant to be spending on development, and this is what they're spending on things like transport and allowances instead. And because of the way our budgets are structured, there's an allocation from the national government known as a conditional allocation, and there's a development allocation, and there's the equitable share that every county gets from the national government, because the counties are still not at a point where they are able to make all the revenue they need from their own internal sources. So if we, for example, investigate a scandal where public finances have been stolen, and then we present it to the public, and then there's outrage, a lot of time that outrage tends to be very short-lived because people will focus on another new scandal when, I don't know, some celebrity does something that is ridiculous, and people focus on that instead. So we keep uncovering these things. In fact, one of the things that came out of our investigative work was a platform called WikiLeaks, that is wikileaks.africauncensored.online. So on WikiLeaks, we've actually tracked a series of corruption scandals. Initially, we were focusing on the national government and how much money is lost to corruption every year. And we found that it's equivalent of a third of the national budget. So for every 10 shillings that the government collects in taxes and revenues and all those other sources, at least 3 shillings of that is being lost to corruption. And this means that we are losing important services that we should be getting. And we're also seeing a situation where the government is focusing on pushing things like the finance bill to squeeze more money out of the increasingly shrinking pool of people who are actually gainfully employed. And instead of actually closing these gaps and cutting off these channels through which this money is being lost. So by essentially distracting us with things like, oh, what has Gachagua said? What is Gachagua doing today? Or this is the church where the president has gone and given 20 million. Instead of us focusing on those things, like we already have this information in our hands, we already have access to these things, so it shouldn't take Africa Uncensored, for example, going and finding these places where this money is meant to be spent and then seeing that instead of a school you have an empty field, or where there's meant to be a road, someone has come and dug up the land and put up a farm and other things like those. Because the stories that we tell are not made up. They're not imaginary. They are actually based on things that are happening around us. So I don't think that it's constructive for us, for example, to focus on things like what these politicians are doing or what the latest scandal is, because the things that actually affect us, the things that affect the cost of living, for example, the things that will push the government to increase VAT on certain goods and say the reason is because USAID has cut funding or this other particular function can't work because we don't have money, those are the things we should be caring about. And at the end of the day, we are here because a lot of the mainstream media and traditional media is essentially struggling because they have also been pushed to the brink. All of these disruptions that have taken away the ability to do the work that we're doing now is really lost. And previously you saw even the journalists who come into this investigative space, a lot of times they start in mainstream and then they realize they can't tell these stories because the people who are owning and running mainstream media outlets tend to be significant people in society, let me say that. And because of that, there's certain stories that will be killed before they make it to the paper or before they make it to TV. And the other thing that we're also seeing is that even when we do a big and significant story, for example, we did a story where we went to Kitui and we found that hospitals and clinics that are meant to be getting funding from the county government to stock anti-venom in regions where there's a very high population of poisonous and venomous snakes, they don't have these facilities. So people are actually dying because the revenues that these counties are getting to provide these services are going and sitting in accounts and they're not being spent. So I don't think we are angry enough, first of all, and I also don't think that we can claim that we don't know what is happening. Because if you look at all of these bills and all of these laws that require the government to publish this information, the government complies. They publish it. And I think last year is probably the first year when a lot of the budget, people were engaging with these budget-making processes because the finance bill itself is a culmination of a very long process. It didn't just emerge out of nothing. What ends up happening is these conversations or these contributions that end up being distilled into the finance bill happen throughout the year. We don't take part in those conversations. We say, oh, I don't have time, I don't care about what's happening in my ward, in my constituency, in my county. And then when it's time for the national government to have this conversation, that's when you say, oh, we should have been consulted. There are mechanisms in place for us to be involved and to be engaged as citizens in these processes. And we really need to explore how we can be involved in these conversations so that when they're deciding, for example, we will build a school in this area or we will build a clinic in this area, you come back at the end and you look at the thing that informs that, the integrated and annual development plans the counties publish, and then you ask them, where is the school you promised? Where are the roads? Where are these other facilities and all these other things? Instead of waiting for them to come and say at a funeral that we are tired of the president being attacked and other things like those. And I really like how one of the things we're seeing is people are actually chasing politicians from funerals because they will come to a funeral where someone has died because a public service has failed. They went to a medical facility, it didn't have the necessary equipment, the necessary medicine, and someone has died and they come and they essentially spit in that person's grave and say, stop insulting the president. But they're being chased because people are actually holding their leaders to account. So we need to get to that point where we are actually pushing these people to do their jobs, and they're actually doing that because, again, we are the ones who employ them and they work for us.
Can I just a little point on what Eric has said? I think Eric and ask me. It's almost one of those things that we have to tick the box so that we move the process forward. I am not yet convinced, and I'm not saying we shouldn't participate, but I'm just saying the government, the policymakers' orientation is not so much that they want the input of the public. It's the law requires that there is public participation, so they will do it, but it's being done solely to tick that box and move on, but not so much that there is real interest in hearing what the people want to say, what their priorities are, and then there is a consideration of those things they say and the priorities that they put forward. I think that's why, for example, we ended up with a deadlock last year with the finance bill, because people had given so much views and the things that they wanted changed, but the policymakers are not willing to change. So that exposes the orientation. The orientation of the policymaker isn't so much about listening to the people and considering the view of the people. The orientation of the policymaker is, this is a requirement of law, this is a step that must be taken, we will take it and we will move on. Your views, we will pick them, but we will disregard them. And so I think that's also the challenge that we need to address ourselves to. I think as Kenyans, as voters, as people who put MPs and senators and MCAs in place and the president, I think we have a lot to ask ourselves, because it seems the people we give positions of leadership, the policymakers we choose, don't really have the interest of the Kenyan at heart. And that's why these processes are run the way that they are run. So ultimately the question comes back, what are we going to do to change the orientation of the policymaker in Kenya? Because if the orientation of the policymaker in Kenya is that I just need to
finance management and them, what are some of the things that do you think are the biggest barriers to ensuring that the information trickles down to them? That is number one. And how is it affecting them in their day-to-day life? As you introduce yourself and say what you also do. Thank you.
Hi, everyone. My name is Anmasi. I work in the fintech space as a UX researcher, and I'm also a tech champion, very huge on cybersecurity, and also ensuring that people use the technology platforms just to make sure that they are creating impact and not taking us to retrogressive ways. So, to the first question is the fact that women generally, even us as young women, feel very far removed from the public finance management conversations. And I could attribute that to one of the longest standing issues, where is women for the longest time have been removed from important conversations in the society, despite the fact that these conversations and these issues impact them. And I'll take you to a very basic level. At home, who plans the finances? It's our women who buy the very basic, like groceries. It's not men who buy those things. What men do is they earn the money, they take that money to the women and they tell them, manage that small amount I've given you. So it's very unfair that at the end of the day, the very people who are entrusted to make allocations to the various aspects and to key aspects of running livelihoods and even running our homes are far removed from the bigger conversation, which is running a country and also allocating money to the country. Also, I think them not being in leadership, and also, so I'll talk about this in two ways. One, not having enough women in leadership. That ideally means that the people who are representing us are men. And sometimes, while they have an image or they are trying to be sensational in terms of addressing issues that impact women, they do not have a full idea of what it means to be a woman, so they lack key context to inform in some of the policies and some of the things that they touch on that end up impacting our lives. Two, we have an issue with the women who are sent to represent us. And I'm sorry to be saying this, it's embarrassing. at the very least, but we must be truthful and we must be honest with ourselves. The women who are sent to represent us, a majority of them, they do not do that. If anything, the only thing they do is engage in very unproductive conversations. We've seen it especially in this leadership. These women gaslight us. We saw it when we were talking about the sanitary pads. For you as a woman to come sit in a room and tell people online that you use tampons, so what? Just because you use tampons doesn't mean that you should touch other products that are used by the larger community of women. I remember one had the audacity of saying on LinkedIn that actually most women don't use pads. And I asked her, where is the data? Because data speaks otherwise. So for them to sit in those rooms as a representation of a group that is important to this conversation and dilute the issues that we go through is a huge part of the problem. I would also say there's a general lack of understanding by our leaders on some of these aspects. You know, there's an assumption that we elect intelligent people. But again, this regime is proving to us that they are not intelligent. Our president told us that we shouldn't tell him anything because he's a PhD holder. But Izo Meaka may run the nation. Does it prove that he's intelligent in any way? I mean, we are telling you, these policies do not make sense. We are not opposed to being taxed, for example. But where is our tax money? SHA. I'm a contributor to SHA, housing levy, and I don't have a choice in it. Mina I'm gonna pata payslip, gava imechukua. And then we are here having a conversation where private hospitals hawataki SHA because government owes them. And then SHA is not even functional. It's working for some people. It's not working for other people. We have cases where now we are having a conversation of people cooking data so that they can benefit from money that is supposed to be making us or giving us access to affordable health care. So when we have these conversations without bringing this context on board, as my colleague said over here, we need to evolve these conversations beyond a time limit. So we had a conversation about the finance bill. We fought it. Then we got to a point we stopped, right? It's we wait for scandalous moments. Like right now, SHA is being spoken about because we are having so many scandalous conversations around it. But when we remove the scandals, do we have these conversations ourselves, right? Now to the issue of access. One, lawyers in the house, finance people in the house, tech people in the house. If I start using tech jargons, yeah, like blockchain, and you're a teacher, how are you supposed to understand what blockchain is? So what the government does is they use Bing English. You know, when they write these documents, nikizungu mingi. Now imagine you have to go to work, come home, feed your kids, cook, you have to think about your paycheck, and then someone expects you to sit down and read 100+ document that has nothing you understand. You only see 1.5% of VAT going here and there. You can probably pick 3 terms that you understand. So how are you supposed to make sense, extract the truth from that document on your own? And they don't help, because when they come for public participation, I would rather ukae nyumbani than listen to a politician explain that document to you. Because all they do now is they take the truth and then they do what Kip Kalia was saying, malinformation. So they'll take the truth, inject their lies, and then tell you this. And they're very good at it. So someone will come to a place like Moranga. They'll tell you, huku tumeallocate pesa inaka hivi kujenga barabara, or we want to build a road. This is how much has been allocated. They know the name of the roads. But along there, they'll find tricks of, for example, appealing to the emotions of the people. So if this road will help Mama Bogas, you know, transport A to B. Except maybe in that place, people don't farm boga. You see, it's something sensational. It's something you can relate to. But sometimes the way it's packaged, you don't even sit down to make sense of it in the sense that, one, is it relevant for me? Are the things that we are allocating money in, especially in our counties and in our country, even relevant to me in the first place? Look at the housing levy. We had the conversation we had recently where they're saying, now we have a whole conversation of you were contributing, it's a harambe you're doing, you'll have to go pay rent. Who told us that? Who dug into that? So sometimes one of the biggest barriers to us having meaningful conversations is how that information is packaged. But I thank God during Finance Bill 2024, people are using tech, ChatGPT. We all remember that tool. And that tool was so smart, you could even ask questions in Sheng. And it was answering questions in Sheng. And that is brilliant because ChatGPT does not care about your level of literacy. And whoever created it also did put in mind they had good intentions. So they made sure it's not misinforming you in any way. To some extent, I remember I tried to probe it, asking the wrong questions, and it would be like, no, you're wrong. This is what this means for you in your particular sector, and this is how this will impact you. And I think that is powerful even in terms of how we do that. Two, we need to also, as organizations, as the different people in the different spaces. For example, in my workspace, because we are in the fintech space, we have these conversations a lot, and they are broken down for us in a relevant way. And I do know my employer has done something very meaningful in that. Every time there's a policy that is impacting us, especially around budgeting, they do call us for a session, and there's a breakdown. If you have to get a lawyer in that room, they'll do that. So it's very important, even as civic organizations, to also take that up, that when we go to the different groups of people, the different communities that we serve, we do ensure that we break down information in ways that are understandable and in ways that can be processed by a mama mboga, by a boda rider, so that they also feel they are part of the conversation, and they are not just picking things we say on Twitter because they are fun and we want to misalign the government, and we hate them so much, so sometimes we are just adding salt. So I think it's important to at least move with integrity, even when we hate and we don't love what the government does so much.
Thank you very much for quite an insightful one. Before we come to you, Emeka, because there is a point that she raised, I would want to know from you, Keith, CSOs and especially organizations like Africa Youth Trust, they have a very big role that they play at the grassroots level, to counter misinformation and about public finance management. What are some of the things do you think can be employed to especially help women? As she said that, there is a lot of jargon that comes, with big policies, big everything. And what are you doing as an organization to ensure that we counter misinformation?
Thank you. As Africa Youth Trust, and I will pick on from what my colleagues had said. So before we even had the finance bill, there are successive budget documents that precede that the finance bill. And I feel for us to even have the demonstrations and the protests, it's because of the need that youth felt they were not being heard from the previous submissions or participations that they did in the previous processes. So before we actually come to having now the Finance Act, so we have the CIDP, which is the County Integrated Development Plan. It's a plan for 5 years for the county. That is then broken down into the annual development plan, which then will detail the projects the county will invest into. And then from that, we can have now the estimates and the ceilings, the budget ceilings that are going to be prioritized in different sectors. So once that is done in the planning on how we are going to spend is done, now we have the finance bill, which gives now the revenue raising measures that are going to be put in place to raise all these revenues that we plan to spend. So I feel like the youths were not heard throughout that process, and even that is at the county level, even at a national level, it's the same scenario. You participate, you submit your memos, but once the report is given, you find that they rejected your submission just because they don't give a clear reason as to why. Yeah, oftentimes I've seen that happen. So as Africa Youth Trust, we engage youths and mostly women. Our target group mostly is young women, and use them in various spaces. We have one thing called the LBAG training, where we do economic literacy, budget accountability, and governance training, where we empower these women to effectively participate and be part of the decision-making process. So that is one thing we do. We also have digital programs where we engage youths on various issues, whatever bills are coming up. We try and engage youths to be able to understand and even be able to share their opinions with their leaders. Also, one of the things that happens, because as one of the speakers has said, the words and the phrases that are used at times are very hard for us to understand. And I just want to give an example. From last year, when the finance bill was tabled, there was no an explainer as to the terms that were used. But this year, the terms they already explained last year, I think in September. So they're already preparing for whatever that might happen. So they don't want a repeat of last time from the lessons that they picked last year. So that is one of the successes we can pick from what we had last year. So I feel that we've continuously had those programs, and one of the things also we do and try to empower young women is once they submit their memos, there is a phrasing and there's a language that is needed to be used. So once they draft whatever information that they have and the proposals that they want taken up by the government, we try and fine-tune the language. As much as we condemn, we can also praise. Not all proposals are bad. Some are good. So we try and appeal to the government. As much as we are condemning and we are not exactly happy with whatever is happening, there are few key things that we can actually say this is a good move. I'll give an example. Last year when we had the finance bill, I saw there was a provision, there was a proposal to tax DSA. As we know, people are paid allowances. Government officials get a lot of allowances, but they are untaxed. So that was one of the good things that came from that. So at least try and bring that understanding and providing information from both divides. This is the good and this is the bad. Yeah, thank you.
To you, Mr. Emeka now. I would like to ask something that Eric raised about the public trust, or rather the trust that the people used to have on, mainstream media, or rather how we call it traditional media. What are some of the things how can you rebuild the trust? Because, every other time that we see a story, it will quickly be propagated, they have been paid. How are you building the trust? And especially to the common mwananchi, to ensure that you are offering credible information, and what are some of the tools using tech now, because we are having that conversation, can be invoked to ensure that, public finance management reporting is accurate and can be verified?
Thank you so much. I just wanted to respond to you. In Kenya, intelligent people don't get elected. Non-intelligent people elect people who sound like them and who look like them in large numbers. Intelligent people sit and have conversations like this, but when we get into the critical decision making on the ballot box in 2027, common sense takes leave, takes sabbatical, and we start having these kind of conversations again. So there is a sense in which we are overwhelmed with the parliament as people who do not sound like us, and we can do something about it. Now, just wanted to say something about the role of the media as a citizen. When we sit in the spaces where we are, we do not produce our content in the audio, text, and the visual platforms in a vacuum. We listen to what is happening outside our spaces. And we curate content in a manner that responds to what people are saying. What do we hear people in Kenya are saying? That the political elite cannot be trusted. That it is that that we hear people saying that the political elite in Kenya is averse to truth. That is why they are in the business, in the industry of disinforming. We hear from our spaces that the political elite in Kenya does not want to be accountable. What it wants to be a king over the people who elected it. They do not want something called involvement. Now, one of the biggest gains of this constitution is a tool called public participation. It was a tool that gives people an opportunity to input in the budget making process. But the politician in the chain considers it a nuisance. And if possible, if you see, they would want public participation to be cosmetic, to be some ritual where we go and speak and our input ends there. What is it that we need to do? We need to look at how strong is the public participation law. Is it just a talk shop? Was it supposed to be just a public baraza? Supposed to be just a public baraza? Where who counter it?
Just to push working paper on the finance bill that was essentially trashed because civil society was saying don't introduce a housing levy because it's going to take money out of people's pockets. Don't introduce all of these other taxes that would essentially impoverish these people. And the government chose to ignore it. And again, the reason why these things keep happening is because there are no consequences for these actions. Just to go back to what my brother said about the people we keep electing, there are mechanisms that are intended to keep these people in check, because if you choose to ignore the people who put you in power when they come and they present their standpoint to you, and you choose to tell people that you don't work for them, you work for Ruto instead, and then they go ahead and impeach you, that is a consequence. And that's one of the reasons why they took so long to reconstitute the IEBC, because that is a genuine consequence for them keeping appearances or maintaining the status quo. So civil society is also really essential, because one of the failings on the government side is actually coming to these, essentially addressing these really critical issues around health and the needs that people have in terms of resource allocation. So where you have a medical facility that does not have medicine, you will actually find a community center that has a clinic that a lot of times is run by a church and a civil society organization, and they will provide these services. So they come in and they fill in for the government where these services are failing, and they come back and tell the government, you don't actually you can't keep the situation going as is. So civil society is really important in these conversations, and they really need as much of our involvement as possible, because they are advocating for us. Yeah.
In a minute, even as you try to answer that other question that I had asked, because we are running out of time and we need to get questions from the audience. As you answer that, now with the rise of influencers, how can we ensure that other alternative media, and especially, away from social media, because it's there to stay, that even the traditional media is reporting accurately on PFM issues, as you answer the other question about the CSO?
So
in a minute.
Yeah, I think Eric has done well on the CSO. Let me just speak about the media. When you think about the media, it's one of those old situations of can't live with them, can't live without them. So that's the relationship I feel like we have with the media. There's how we feel like we can live without them, but there is also the reality that we can't live without them. Most of this country is rural, and there are a lot of people in the rural areas. So Kenya is probably maybe somewhere around 30% urban and 70% rural. You can kill me if my data is not right. But the point I'm trying to make is that most of this country is rural. And a lot of people would consume their information from radio, just riding on what Eric said. So that Media Council of Kenya report rates radio at 33% in terms of where people seek information from, TV as well, and then social media is about 18%. So Kenya is still largely rural. And so there are a lot of people in the rural areas, and they will not necessarily get this information from social media or from influencers or from what have you. They will get it from local radio, vernacular radio, community radio stations. So I think that an investment in terms of capacity for the practitioners in those spaces, in the community radios and the vernacular radios, may be necessary, so that as they lead conversations on their programs, then they can be informing Kenyans from a position of knowledge. And as an organization, that's work we've done. We have provided capacity support for radio hosts on vernacular radio stations on this very subject of public finance management, so that they can engage with their listeners from an informed perspective. I think that's an investment that needs to continue if we're going to be able to help our people counter the disinformation and the misinformation that we're talking about. Thank you.
Thank you very much. To you also, in a minute, tafadhali, be brief, that we can get other questions. You say that women are they are largely affected by the budgetary or the PFM issues, right? But they consist of the biggest voting bloc, if I'm not wrong again. Don't kill me like Manga said, if my data is not wrong. But how can we empower women to hold, the leaders accountable on, public finance management, and especially the spending part of it?
I think one, we need to hold enough space for women to ideally even come out and say they want to vie, and us embracing that. If you've seen what happens in this country is, right now, everybody's listening to me. If I say I want to vie for a seat, the kind of violence that is subjected to women, both physically and online, especially online, this is the opportunity people take to dig into your life. And it's very unobjective, right? So you'll be fought over things like motherhood, who you're married to, who you're sleeping around with. But these are standards that men are not held on. If anything, they are applauded for them. So we tend to hold women to higher standards that we do not hold men to, and we make that space very violent for them. And it's one of the reasons why they shy away from taking up leadership to mentorship. So I've had a complaint with women who've tried, especially young women who've tried to vie for these seats, right? So they'll go to chamas or these parties, and then they will be promised that their hand will be held and they will be led into these positions. But then when we go to the nomination, someone is just there trying to be sneaky about it. And there's a lot of politics also involved at that level. And sometimes it's very annoying. And even the women in politics, most of them, they do not take the time to mentor young women and bring them into these leadership positions. 3, I think women need to look at different ways they can take leadership and different avenues they can get into these spaces. So also being part of the conversations without shying away. I mean, we must sometimes force our way into these conversations. Go to those events and insist that you need to speak and you need to be heard. If someone tells you to sit down, tell them you're not a citizen by accident. You are a Kenyan woman. Your citizenship is not up for debate. And by that right alone, you deserve to be heard. You deserve to contribute to the conversation. You deserve that space. Sometimes you'll just have to force your way through it. And finally, I think it's time we accepted that women have something to say. Their emotions are an important part of the conversation. We've seen where logic has led us, right? I'm not saying it's a bad thing, but we need balance of both sides. Emotions is not necessarily a bad thing. Sometimes it brings the perspective, the human perspectives, because human beings are ideally emotional. We would like to think that even the way we vote, we make logical voting decisions, but they're driven by emotions. Because emotions are the very core, are there to protect you. They are there to determine what makes sense to you the most. It's why right now, SHA is paining us. It's an emotional pain. It's not a logical pain, right? So we need a balance of both, and it's time we started realizing that we can, yes, we cannot do away with, or we cannot over-rely on one group in society while excluding the other, and we think we'll have a sober and straight society.
Okay, Mr. Meka has something to say about that in a minute, please, so that we can go to
I'll make it less than a minute.
Okay, please. Today.
As I said, that thing which you have spoken about gets into the space of malinformation. Malinformation is where you get private details of a person and deploy them negatively. You can do, I get to know information about you, and then those things you are talking about, and then I malinform around you. I say, oh, your character is some sort of character assassination. It is malicious. Malinformation is malicious. Now, talking about women and the involvement, I ran 2 newspapers, and we have made certain decisions about, very deliberate decisions about covering issues, women. And then the other day we were having a conversation with my team on, can we do something around women columnists? When we were counting the number of women columnists we have across our platforms, we realized that there are not very many. So we have made a deliberate decision that as a content product, we will weave in women voices so that all of you can be heard. So right into our spaces. And then the other thing we are doing at the Media Max is that we are welcoming you to have these conversations on our various platforms. So be engaged with us, and you're welcome to engage in our to engage in our different platforms, TV, radio, and newspaper. So women, come and write for me.
Okay, pass it to Keith. Keith, in a brief. Okay. Don't make it even a minute or so. We are a median. We are a very youthful generation, rather as a country, at a median of 19 right now, if my statistics stands right. How can we empower these young people to counter misinformation on, PFM issues, briefly, or?
Okay, so before I answer, I'll start by saying, as I said before, we have engagements with youth and mostly women. So once we do, we facilitate them to go to public participation, and they give their views. They'll ask me, then what next? I'll tell them we'll wait for the report and see what views have been taken up. And then once the report comes out or the final document is tabled, we'll go through the document and see what views were actually picked from the public. When we find there are no views, they then ask me, what next? I tell them there's nothing we can do, because if we've participated to that level, the next thing we can do, maybe we can sue, where we have public interest litigation. But there's budget concerns around that, and it takes a lot of time. So I'm saying this to say that the buck stops at our leaders, because as it was mentioned, we'll have these bills and whatnot, and the people who are first to do misinformation and all this disinformation are our leaders. They will go back to the machinani places and tell them, this is good for you. I mean, the president means well, or so-and-so means well, but in real sense, the bill seeks to disadvantage them even more. So I'll say that, and I'll also add that, from going back to your question, is how to actually learn. If there's a forum or if there's any informative thing going on in regards to public finance, it's prudent for us to actually engage and be part of it. Yeah, thank you.
Thank you very much to my amazing panel. I would like at this juncture to give the plenary 2 questions, and I can see so many. So we're gonna pick the ones that were here, like you and you and you. Yes, please, in a brief, tafadhali. And if it will be very necessary, if you direct it to a single person, so that we can, give them as they offer their closing remarks. Tafadhali.
At least 2 because of time. Hoja. So we'll take gent and a lady. Ama nao nakuja wote. Okay.
Good afternoon. My name is Meru Wanjiru from a very powerful movement called Activisa. My question is to the media. Why do we keep seeing the same faces every time? Because there are people out here who have good, powerful information, but we keep seeing the same generic people who are not, how are you on ground? And that's why the conventional media is losing touch with young people, because young people want people who will be there. My other question is to the person or from the NGO. Why are you not supporting movements? Movements, the minute we support a lot of movements are willing to go the extra mile. For them, it's not even about resources. For them, it's about change. For them, it's about, there is very few limitation when it comes to movement. So we can think as we empower young people, empowering movement so that they can go the extra mile. And it's so unfortunate that the people we look up to, and in this case CSO, because they have been the biggest people, they have been the biggest people who...
Shiro, it was supposed to be a minute, tafadhali.
Malaysia. Like for the CSOs, they have been the shield between the bad governance and the people, getting to a point they are losing hope, saying, this is the farthest we can go. Because last year, if we had a movement, last year but one, today we could not have been, iyo nini haingepita, iya finance, iya housing. Because you see, it's only a few people who had this information. The masses didn't have. As much as last year ilipita, finance bill imepita kidogo kidogo. The minute the masses knew and understand what was at play, haikupita, okay, ilipita tu pole pole. But it's high time we start investing in people, and people starting to fight for their voices and passing the mic to the masses, not just a few people, so that not a few people are targeted. Thank you.
In a brief, please.
Yeah, I will be brief as possible. Good afternoon. Thank you. Momanyi Joshua is my name. Head of Legal Affairs at Cross-Party Democracy. This way we empower the youth to ensure that we are not having such issues of misinformation and disinformation in public management. So my question is to the media. During the Gen Z protest, that's back in June, that's last year, the government has not yet addressed that issue. But instead, sijui amefanya misinformation or disinformation of ensuring that you're creating broad-based government. As the media, what are you going to ensure that they are addressing what was questioned by the Gen Z, which is us? So at the moment, they are giving us a misinformation on broad-based government, which was not part and parcel of what was asked during the protest. The final question to the guys from the civil societies. We did see that you are very critical, and usually you partner with international NGOs or other stakeholders, either the embassies. But recently we did see a case of misinformation, a direct misinformation from a senior government official who happens to be a PS for Foreign Affairs, PSingor. He did do a great misinformation, and it's not the first one. We have also seen the president as CSOs. What are you doing to ensure that such cases, which usually affect us directly as citizens when we are outside the country, because we do interact with these guys who are the victims from our government officials, what are you doing in addressing such? Thank you.
Good evening. My name is Rina. I am from the Coast Regional Budget Hub. I like this conversation that has been brought about misinformation and disinformation. And I want to add that in the space of disinformation and misinformation, there's one thing that stands in between there, and that is fact. And facts don't lie. You have to do another research to disagree with facts. We are all familiar with politicians saying this statement of, if you have SHA, you should not pay for anything when you get to the facilities, right? That's a very familiar statement that we've had. But what is factual? Factual is, if you have SHA and you're covered, you can only be paid for according to the benefits package of SHA, which are limited. For example, if you take a private insurer, it's the same. If your dental cover is 25,000, if you go even 25,000 and 1 shilling, that 1 shilling will come out of pocket. So my question to the media is, how do we counter such statements? Because they have become so much rampant, where we see politicians taking advantage of the community. So how can we bring in the aspect of evidence in the communication that is being made? The other question is to see a civil society organization. I work in the budget space. One of the most opaque process in the budget process is the implementation stage of the budget. That's where there's silence, and then later we come to discover that projects have sold, something has not been done here and there. So how can we continue to push, even with that urgency that we push when we are formulating budgets, monitoring them and requesting for implementation reports to be done on time, so that we can be able to see what was promised and the actual thing on the ground? Thank you.
Thank you so much. Can we respond to those questions in at least 10 minutes? In 10 minutes we get done.
Okay.
Thank you.
Yes. I will direct the very first question to Emeka and the media focus person. Why do we keep on having the same faces over and over again on our media, on our screens, or even in our columns or every other thing? Are we not having enough people who can offer their opinions? That is the question asked by Shiro from Activista.
Shiro, good evening. Oh, it's an interesting question, and it's something that we are grappling with. This is the situation we are in. We have found out that over a long time, media has been an ivory tower that speaks down to others. That we sit in certain cubicles and lecture other Kenyans on what to do. That is a role that has since gone away. Now, what we are hearing is that, for instance, our audiences have changed, and they do not want those guys you see on television. Actually, they are giving us what we call news avoidance. You get to see them on television, and they are so predictable, or their columns are so predictable, because you already know what to expect from them. So we are dealing with something called news avoidance because of the people, of the guests we are using on our platforms. Now, what is the remedy? Engage. We want, the Kenyan population is 70% young people. We want young people to come and join our platforms and drive their conversations. So it is something that we are deliberate about. The old audiences we used to produce newspaper for have long gone. They are younger people, and we want people who look like them to drive their conversations across our platforms. So come and drive these conversations using our platforms. Now, somebody has asked something about broad-based and media. If you look at this thing called broad-based, these are politicians who cut a political deal at the end of a revolution which was not theirs. Politicians who people see as part of the problem cut a political deal at the end of a revolution that was not theirs. So, what then is the role of the media in this? The role of the media is to continue calling them out. That, oh, this broad-based thing is a government that was put together on the blood of young people. We should be able to say that these are politicians who are part of the whole problem,
who cut a political deal for a revolution that was not theirs. And then help amplify voices across platforms that help the people who were in the revolution take back their country from mischievous politicians. And this is what these conversations should be about. Lastly, somebody has said that between malinformation, disinformation, and misinformation, there's a big thing called fact, which politicians don't like, and the truth. That's why fact-checking is a very important instrument in curation of content. The kind of politicians we have today are very hostile to facts. And truth. So the role of the media is to amplify and provide platforms that amplify fact and truth. If we fact check them. Our president, by the way, does not like being fact checked. Truth.
About the whole budget making process. She's talked about the fact that the implementation stage of the budget is usually quite silent. We only talk about the formulation but not really the implementation. And I think that where the media can really come through for us and therefore continue to hold the dear space that it has held before is in helping us to understand these things. So I've never understood why we have to have politicians or MPs and senators and governors coming to the morning programs or the evening programs to talk about these things when you have experts who understand these things, like the people at Budget Global or at Budgeti or at Media Focus or wherever. Why don't we have these guys come to talk about SHA, and you will have a very balanced, a very objective conversation about it. I don't know why media has this idea that for a discussion to be objective, you have to have our Munyoro guy on the platform. You have to have a guy who's pro the president on the platform, and potentially you have a third person who is pro Rao on the content on the platform. And that when you do that, then that is how you achieve balance and how you achieve objectivity. I don't necessarily think so, because each of those persons will come to speak to their interest. They will not necessarily come to speak the facts. So I think one way that media can help us in this whole conundrum we're talking about is beginning to get experts, people who really understand these things, to be the ones to speak about these policy issues, and not necessarily, bringing all manner of politicians from different political orientations, so that then we have that conversation. If we do that, then the facts will come out and the people will get to know what is true and what is not false. The controller of budget releases reports every 3 months, the implementation reports, and you will see headlines about what she has said. But the conversation never goes beyond that. So again, there is an opportunity there. There are excellent opportunities that exist that if our media houses took full advantage of and invited the right people onto those platforms, this information will get distilled and the people can actually be able to do something about it. The Auditor General releases reports. One of the most serious things she's done recently is tell us about the procurement of the SHA system. But what is going to happen beyond the fact that she has come and said the Constitution was violated? She has done her role. What are we going to do about the fact that the Constitution was violated? So I think media has an opportunity to regain that dear place that it has always held, and it can only do that by pushing the politicians a little bit to the side and getting experts on these issues to be the ones coming to these platforms and engaging and breaking these things down for us. Thank you.
This one is, I would want you to, Eric, just give your closing remarks in 30 seconds, please, because, our timekeepers are about to swallow me alive. Okay. Kindly.
All right. I'd say my parting shot is that all of the information that we need to act is already available. And a lot of times we will need to find a way to communicate these to the people around us, the people we love, because they may be acting on assumptions based on where they consume their information that are false, and that a lot of times is by design. So I would say that one really fantastic thing that came out of last year's protests and the discussion around the finance bill is how it was broken down into multiple languages, even sign language, and people were able to engage with the finance bill in a very meaningful way, in a way that cut through all the noise and all the misinformation. So if you can do that for all of these other pieces of legislation and all of these other processes, so that we don't have a situation where these things are being sensationalized, or they're being distorted, or they're being used to present false narratives, then I think we do really well. So the first place is to identify where this information is. And a lot of times the government has tried to hide like information in 60-page PDF documents you have to download and then read through, and then you have to turn your head because of where the pages are oriented. But there's people already doing this work, analyzing this information and breaking it down. So let's engage with these communities. And a lot of times these questions that we need to ask have already been answered. So find out more about what's happening around you, especially regarding public finance, and then come to us, for example, and look at the tools we're putting out and see what we're saying, so that when you're going to engage with these politicians, it's not you're coming to find out things for the first time, you're coming to actually ask them questions from a point of knowledge. Thank you.
In 30 seconds, please. Oh, okay.
So I'll be very brief and say something I saw this morning. And a Kenyan was saying that we need to involve beyond conversations. We are very huge on talk. There is a talk happening around everything and anything, but people don't invest in moving beyond those spaces. So maybe after having this conversation, and maybe in a few months to come, we should take this to the actual people, especially the government. I mean, enda wakute, and tell them, you'll need to sit here, you will listen to us, and you will do what we need to do, because that is what is lacking. We have these conversations on X, kuna groups, policies, I mean one, that is monitoring tech policies that come out every day. And what I've seen in those groups is they've gotten so involved. We had an incident where one of us was threatened with abduction. And we told the government, mkujie, tuwakujie. And that's what we need. We need to involve beyond this. So maybe next time, tuchukue tents zetu, and a parliament, have a conversation with them, whether they like it or not.
Wow, okay, Keith, please, your closing remarks. It's on now.
I want to close by answering Shiro and Rena. So you've mentioned that you've asked us if we work with movements. So I want to inform you that we work with the Young Urban Women Movement. We've been working with them since 2017, and we try to involve them even in such discussions. I'm sure some are even here right now. So that is to answer you. And for Rena, during the implementation stage, as you've said, it normally just passes us. But even through my interactions with the Coastal Regional Budget Hub is when I found out that we can actually ask for those documents, the quarterly implementation reports, and even see the progress that has been made for the first 3 months. Yeah. So we try and analyze those documents and see how the county has performed for the first 3 months. So by the time it comes to the end of the year or the financial year, we already have an understanding of what has been happening throughout. So as I finish, I just want to say that being in this space, it can be tiring. So let us not tire. Let's continue pushing for transparency and accountability. And I feel like there's a right setting and the mood is set for us to actually move or push the country forwards. Thank you.
Mr. Emeka, please. In 30 seconds.
In 30 seconds. We want to look at long at the days when the budget used to be that briefcase. A minister holds at the end. But budgeting is a process and we need to be involved. In a situation where government that wants to sustain in power itself in power through lies, media is an important now. Lastly, it is one thing to talk about them. These people we are calling them, we are going to go there and tell them. But at the end of the day, we also have a responsibility to occupy those spaces. Let's stop talking and of ourselves for leadership. Because at the end of the day, unless you take that political power they have, you will sit here and mourn about them. We have got an opportunity to of ourselves for leadership and make decisions about our health, our education, and our future. It is time to stop mourning and of ourselves for leadership.
Thank you very much. Today we have dissected what misinformation and disinformation is, and I do hope that each and every person who was present in this discourse has been enlightened, or rather learned something. To my amazing panel, asanteni sana for being there. We have understood as a citizenry that, issues to do with public finance management cuts across, health, infrastructure, and even education. And as I complete, or as rather I sign off, I would say, if we understand where the money goes, it is easier to fight where it should go. We get that? If we understand where the money is going, it is easier to fight where it should go. Whether it's in SHA, whether it is in education, whether it is, in elderly people, or even in our development. Because it's our money, and we need to know where it's going. Thank you very much, and asanteni sana.
Thank you so much. Let's appreciate this panel. We can align up to pigwe picha. Take a group photo up juu. In the meantime, ladies and gentlemen, I believe we've had a good engagement, and we just want to bring it down and then join the main podium pale. Watu watingike kidogo, alafu tuende nyumbani, tupige refreshment, tungoje kesho. Sitakuwa sawa? What should I tell them? Oh, you guys should carry those boxes, bana. You should hold the boxes. In the meantime, ladies and gentlemen, angalia tu hapo mahali umeketi. Hapo mahali umeketi. Angalia hapo chini kama kuna chupa ya maji. Kuna chupa ya maji? Iko hapo Sasa ukitoka, unaona ile kitu ya blue hapo nyuma. Unaweka hapo ndani. Mimi nitakuja kuzichukua baadaye. Sitakuwa sawa? Itakuwa sawa. Usitoke kwanza. Wewe ni mbunge, my friend. Ladies and gentlemen, asubuhi today tumekuwa na 4 sessions, and I believe that we've picked something just as yesterday, and tomorrow we are going to have more sessions to discuss critical issues that actually directly impact into your lives as far as public finance management is concerned. So kesho tulikuja saa 2, kesho tunaanza saa 2:30. So by 8 a.m. tumeketi. Au sio? Just some few key takeaways. In the morning we had a discussion up around accountability and engaging with the citizen. How the county revenue how the county governments and assemblies participate in the revenue performance, and we all agree that many counties underperform on the OSR, innovation and automation, and community specific strategies that can boost collections. And in these discussions with our panelists, we agreed that public participation in the budgeting is very critical. And each and every person need to be incorporated. Wajue, what do you think about this budget that is being that is being tabled or discussed within the county assemblies? In our second discussion, we had the private sector's engagements, and we all agreed that businesses should be proactive in supporting social causes and consistency in policies which enables the private sectors to thrive. We also agreed that youth and innovation is very critical as far as private sectors looking forward to support and ensuring that we foster partnership and creating enabling environment for the young people to participate in these processes as far as innovation is concerned. Tulikubaliana hivyo. Na sasa hivi tumekubaliana kwamba misinformation in public finance management is a big problem. It's an issue, sindio? And we also agreed that lack of understanding of PFM, that is public finance management, is widespread, And media and investigative journalism are playing a very key role in this. And therefore, they have also they have a responsibility to counter disinformation and misinformation. Ladies and gentlemen, my name is Ken Babu once again. I was the MC, and I'm saying that kesho vile tulirauka tunarauka. Usike bila kuangalia hapo chini. Ensure you're not leaving kitu hapo chini, si ndio? Haya, tunasimama tupate national anthem, tufunge national anthem, si ndio? Aya, DJ, can you get us the national anthem so that we be the only village actually yenye inaanza na national anthem na inafunga na national anthem, si ndio? Tufunge na national assembly now that you are the majority. Aya, DJ umepata? Ulishazima? Aya. Wewe alikuwa shazima bwana. Nani atatuimbia? Justice be a shield and defender. May we dwell in unity, peace and liberty. Plenty be found within our borders. Thank you. Naona watu nakula ulimi pale. Kuna ndugu yangu pale anaogopa hata hii mic simfikia kiimba. Thank you so much, ladies and gentlemen. Tomorrow 8 a.m. we are seated. By 8:30 we are on.
Ladies and gentlemen, I can welcome you all to the main stage where we'll have some music. So let's all converge there at the main stage of PDF Festival, where we have the real festival. Don't forget to visit our political parties expo and our civil society expo down there, the exhibitions at the stalls down there. And also remember, we have the music up to whatever time you decide. So let's all meet at the main stage for the PDF Festival as we conclude this day today. Pia tukutane kesho hapa saa 2 without fail.
Nilipe jema moja moja, maana hata